Shannon Teresi, thanks for joining us on the Illinois Channel. You are a candidate, the Republican candidate for state comptroller, and I would guess that a lot of people haven't heard about you. Before we start, let me just for the audience sake introduce a little bit of your background. This comes from your website that you have a bachelor's in accounting from Northern Illinois, a master's in accounting from Northern Illinois. You are a CPA, you're a certified internal auditor, a certified risk management assurance, and a certified fraud examiner. So that is all. I think as long as we're talking about someone who is wanting to be the state comptroller, sounds like you are ready for the job, at least on paper. So why don't you give us, first as we begin, introduce yourself to the audience for those who haven't heard about you and some of your political philosophies, and maybe weave in just a bit about why are you even seeking this job?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Terry.
Sure.
My name is Shannon Teresi, like he said, and I'm running statewide for comptroller. And I'm running because Illinois is the most corrupt, fiscally mismanaged, and highest tax state in the nation. And we have an opportunity in this election to change that. I am, like he said, a CPA. That's someone trained in government accounting. I'm a forensic accountant. Wouldn't it be great to actually put a fraud examiner in the state of Illinois and in charge of our finances? And as a certified internal auditor, that means someone that is ready to go in there and make changes. What I do professionally as the elected McHenry County Auditor is I work with departments, do performance audits, operational audits, and I'm trained in government auditing, accounting to make a difference where it's needed the most and serve the people as the elected McHenry County Auditor and as your next comptroller. And
I was going to say, it sounds like your job is somewhat already similar to what the job would be as a state comptroller.
Yeah.
And for those who don't know, I'll tell you, this is one of those offices, certainly, which doesn't tend to get a lot of attention at the statewide level. We think of U.S. Senator or Governor. In the state of Illinois, we have a state treasurer that kind of invests the money the state has sitting in their bank account. They invest it in short-term instruments. But it is the comptroller's office that then uses that money, transfer it over, that writes the checks. At the federal level, Shannon, we have seen where reportedly there have been billions of dollars paid out fraudulently through of the COVID funds. And so right. the danger is that when the state comptroller, I'm not accusing Susana Mendoza, who's the current of this, but I'm just saying institutionally, this is a danger that if there is someone trying to defraud the state comptroller could send them a check that they shouldn't be getting. So have you had experiences like this in your career thus far? And what kind of changes to the Office of Comptroller are you pushing for?
Yeah, great question. So I worked in Fortune 500 companies doing auditing, tax, financial preparation, and also did internal auditing, financial reporting, and currently the elected McHenry County Auditor. And I have seen many, I would say about 50% of what is requested by departments, we ask additional information or we send back to the department because it is either not an official payment, it's a quote. We had an example where we had an elected official that wanted chapstick with their name on it. And so it is of the utmost importance of the comptroller's office acting as your chief accountant of the state who's responsible for all statewide operations from a fiscal standpoint to make sure that they are qualified to be looking at the bills, because right now they are a rubber stamp. They are not auditing the state bills, and we need to do something about that. And that's starts with putting a qualified comptroller into that office. Right now, we have a career politician, Susana Mendoza, who has no expertise in charge of our state's finances. I mean, she doesn't know the difference between a bus schedule and a balance sheet. This is a problem, and we need change.
Leslie Munger held the job before Susana Mendoza, and I talked to Leslie. I interviewed her when she was comptroller.
Great.
I know at the time she was saying that the state's computer systems are so out of date that she would be getting the information 9 months late. So in October she would be getting, March's numbers. And she said they were so old by that time, they were not actionable. And I'm sorry if you wanted to say anything on that, I don't know if you had some thoughts on that.
So the state of Illinois is the worst run organization, not just in government. It's one of the worst run organizations, and it's not acceptable. Our taxpayer money should be held with the highest regard, the best technology. And what we're seeing is Susana has an old way of thinking of things. They pay bills in months or years, and now she's claiming days, when the true reality is we've automated our process in McHenry County, and under my leadership, we now pay bills in minutes. And this was an easy fix. We didn't need a whole system implementation. This was easily done to automate and have bills transparent. And so we see not just on the bill payment side, on the financial side in the comptroller's office, they take almost a year to close their financial statements. And it's because they're not getting good information, because there's no top-down leadership financially. And this kind of brings me to what is the comptroller's office should be doing. And right now, that office is not working with state departments. It is only looking at itself. Mendoza herself has not taken responsibility when something occurs outside of her department, because she's not acting like the chief accountant of the state, because she's not qualified and wouldn't even get a job interview in a corporation for that same role.
I've been covering state government for over 25 years. Bruce Rauner came in and rightfully said that he wanted to update the computer systems. I don't know to what extent obviously you're not able to look inside the comptroller's office as an outsider right now, but when you just said, which was interesting, that you had updated McHenry County system, could you do that for the state, or would you need the governor's office to be buying new computers?
No, we encourage departments to scan in the invoice up front and send an electronic copy. And then we do additional auditing to make sure that we're getting that goods were actually received and that this is an actual valid invoice. But it's that whole paperless process. And so the invoice comes to us electronically in minutes, and then approved or rejected. And we can put notes and reject it, why it's being rejected, if it's
Can I interrupt, because I'm curious, when you did this for McHenry County, did all of a sudden you find out that there were a lot of bills that shouldn't have been paid previously? In other words, did you uncover fraudulent bills that previously had been getting paid? Did the cost of government go down, therefore, because what you were paying were actual bills and not inflated bills?
We've had a robust audit process there in McHenry County, because we've hired CPAs, forensic accountants, to review. We did automate with a document storage program, and then now with a financial system. But yes, doing the auditing, we have stopped individuals submitting false time reports, duplicate payments, vendors that were charging stuff that was not eligible. but we have continued increasing our review process and putting qualified staff in there. And that's not being done. I've talked to staff in the comptroller's office, and they're not reviewing bills. But really, the greater opportunity of what I've done in my office is not just reviewing bills. We actually review purchases before money is spent, before services are rendered. So before PO can be set up, which is a purchase order, it has to go through my office, and they get permission to buy what they want and to go ahead and procure services or to spend money.
And even though the state would be spending billions of dollars and you're not, I don't know, maybe you're spending $1 billion. Basically, how much money goes through your department in McHenry County?
$500 million a year.
Okay, so I mean, while the numbers are different, the point is the same, that you could have a better system than what the state is currently doing and catch that. You know, I'll share with the audience and you that over the 25 years I've covered state government, occasionally you hear stuff and your jaw drops, right? Mm-hmm. And you go, oh my God. One of the stories that stuck with me was I was interviewing a woman whose expertise was finding out medical fraud. And of course, we know that there are billions of dollars in medical expenses for state workers and everything else. And she said to me, Terry, what would you think if I'm a bad person and I want to rip you off financially? What would I want? And most people would say, well, you would want my credit card number. She said, if you're the average person, you only have a credit line of maybe $5,000. But if I can get your health care card and buy your Social Security number off the dark web, I can charge the state millions of dollars for treating you as Dr. Bob or Dr. Joe. And the state is so incompetent with their financial records, they don't even know if Dr. Bob's a doctor.
Right.
And so I say this for the audience sake that, you know, maybe comptroller, it doesn't sound sexy, like, you know, talking about abortion or gun rights and all that. But it's so critically important that the state doesn't even know, out of $46 billion that it spends, how much of it is actually going to what you want it to go to, how much are they paying on duplicate invoices, how much are they paying to doctors who are actually criminals in jail who are billing the state, you know, theoretically, based upon what my example was of the healthcare person. So,
yeah, that's completely well said. And that's what we were seeing in the comptroller's office, is that they're not taking responsibility for the overall control structure. And $457 million went out in fraudulent claims because they're not taking responsibility per statute to work with these departments to make sure they're not approving that. And they're not going to do a press release when money goes out fraudulently. They're going to hide it because they don't want to take blame. And this is what we've seen with audits between the on the treasurer's office. The auditor general said $1.6 billion of duplicate entries were performed by Mendoza's office of duplicate revenue, and she's not taking responsibility for it as comptroller. She's trying to post blame on the treasurer's office, even though she recorded the entries, and it's the second year in a row that this has occurred. This is not acceptable, and Illinoisans need to wake up. We have Susanna Mendoza in charge of our money, and she's tied to Mike Madigan.
She was a former House member who, you know, Mike Madigan ran the roost, as we know. So she was in the House before she became state comptroller, defeating Leslie Munger, who had been appointed to the office. People may remember after Judy DePinka died. So, you know, I would say to people, if as you said, I think, you know, over $1 billion because of bad systems, It's not even necessarily corruption, it's just bad systems. And I have found over the years government is woefully behind the scenes, whether it's at the federal level or the state level. So often they just don't take responsibility for upgrading the systems as they should, which is, again, what Governor Rauner was trying to do when he started the new Do It to upgrade. And he had said that some of our computer systems had dated back to even before Ronald Reagan became president. Now, the state's spending $46 billion. No one running any kind of a private business of any size at all would have computers that were from the Reagan administration, but the state of Illinois does. And this is, we could use that $1 billion in duplicate invoices to upgrade our computer systems, and heaven knows how much we could find out. In fact, people may remember when Governor Quinn was in office, they did a test and audited who were getting Medicaid payments, and they found out of 20,000 or so people they audited, something like 70% or so of the people getting the Medicaid payments weren't eligible to get them.
Yeah.
So it's theoretically billions of dollars at stake that could be saved if the systems were upgraded. I don't mean to pontificate.
Yeah. Well, we are not getting honest, truthful answers. Right now, the state has actually taken on more debt, but Susana Mendoza is not talking about it. The true reality is, since she's been in office, there's been a decline of $73 billion of the state's financial position, and she's not talking about it because it's not politically convenient for her. And the true reality is, she was a state rep, and she literally lit the match on the whole situation by approving budgets that were not balanced. And the true reality is, even now as the comptroller, that reckless spending is continuing. Right now, if you open up the 2021 financial statements, you can see that they approved the final budget was not balanced, and what they actually spent was more expenses than they took in revenue. And the state's financial position has continued to worsen. So since Mendoza's over the last 20 years, it has worsened by $200 billion. And this debt, our children and grandchildren will be paying for. Right now, they are strictly debt swapping. It's like paying off one credit card and opening up 25 more. And Illinoisans will have to pay for this for generations to come. The interest and the debt, and what's going to happen is they're going to tax more and tax us out of our homes. We need to wake up, and change is now. And I wanted to speak on her ties to all the indictments. If we have a second, I wanted to talk about.
You're referring to what the investigation into Speaker Madigan and what he was doing with AT&T and allegedly getting jobs for some of his cronies at AT&T.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, ComEd, I should say, ComEd.
Yeah. Susana Mendoza, she actually got her career start in Danny Solis's ward organization. And when she ran for mayor, she got $100,000 for Danny Solis's political ward organization. This was probably the largest donation that ward organization has done, and they gave it to Susana Mendoza when she ran for mayor. Danny Solis has gone on to be indicted, and that's a deep connection. She actually got married in Ed Burke's home by Ed Burke's wife, and said, even about Ed Burke, she said, "You are a true champion of mine, and Ed Burke is the primary reason I stand before you today." And Ed Burke has been indicted. She gave the nominating speech for Mike Madigan to become Speaker of the House and said, "He is my mentor. He is someone I look up to." And this is someone who is in charge of our money, who is not an accountant, is a career politician, and is not qualified to be leading the state, working with Illinoisans and businesses to attract new businesses and state departments. It is extremely antiquated office that is literally misleading the taxpayers, and only can talk about one fund because the true reality is the state is on fire and Illinoisans are being impacted.
We have pension payments that are being underpaid. They're being paid properly as far as the system that was set up about 30 years ago, referred to as the Edgar ramp under Governor Edgar. But others have said, actuaries have said, the pension payments should be like $13 billion a year, not the approximate $10 billion or so they're paying. To be fair to Comptroller Mendoza, she would probably say when Governor Rauner, when she came in, Governor Rauner had $16 billion of unpaid bills. And now we have brought those down. I haven't looked at them just recently, but maybe you have. But they're now down around $4 billion. And part of that, you're never going to get that to zero because you always have a 30-day kind of a float. So you're always got money that is unpaid on a cycle. You know, you might carry, when you have a $46 billion budget, I'm going to make a number up, but maybe the right number would be $3 billion or so, you know, floating around. So they have gotten rid of a lot of the bills that were over 90 days to which the taxpayers were paying 12% interest to those vendors. So I think she would want that to be known and said. What is your response?
Susana Mendoza, if you look on her website, she is just talking about the general fund. And even in the financial statements, it says we're getting sued, we're didn't pay our bills with a vendor, and that's something that was mentioned in the financial statements. So the true reality is she's debt swapping. She has taken out significant more loans to pay down short-term liability and shifted the burden for generations to come. The state overall is not better off. We are worse off. And this is a key point. This is kind of similar to your home. If you take on more debt, like open up a credit card just to pay off one credit card or your utility payment for the month, a couple months of bills, are you better off or still worse off? Have you really fixed the problem if you're continuing to spend? And that's what the state of Illinois is doing. And actually, Moody's says that without real reform, if we hit a recession, the state of Illinois, we will crash. I mean, we will have to tax our way out of it, and taxes are going to go up if Susana Mendoza is elected. She was asked about it and really refused to answer the question and danced around it. And the bond rating increases are not an achievement on the comptroller or J.B. Pritzker. The state of Illinois can record the revenue as soon as they can estimate it. So they knew they were getting federal COVID money, $185 billion, not just to the state, but all the government entities, the private businesses, and that is what impacted these bond ratings, not financial achievements of J.B. Pritzker and Susana Mendoza. They have taken us in the opposite direction, and we need change this November.
It is something where obviously we had that influx of money that is not to be counted on. I have another friend we've interviewed a number of times who runs a nonprofit called Truth in Accounting, and she's using her to say that the state of Illinois has never balanced their budget in recent years, or, I mean, going back by recent years, I would say, for at least 20 years, they are not meeting their constitutional obligation of actually balancing the budget. It is more of a shell game it used to be where they would stick, speaking of the comptroller's office, I mean, and I'm not pointing fingers at Susana Mendoza here, but for years the state would just hold back bills. And this is why they were so behind in paying some vendors, because they would just hold back bills that were incurred in a fiscal year, but they wouldn't pay them until the following fiscal year so that they could say, see, we balanced the budget. Well, you didn't balance the budget because you incurred the bills, you just didn't pay them.
Right.
So they weren't being honest as far as their accounting and their reporting to the public as far as what was going on.
Yeah. And if the public is being misled, we're going to overall have more debt to pay and it's going to be increasing, that's something we need to know about. I mean, she would have to do a press release every week about the new debt that she's taking on, the new bond issuance, and how we're going to pay for it in 2050 and 2060 as the pension debt continues to climb. But Mendoza is not qualified. She actually issued financial statements that you cannot rely on, which is not acceptable in publicly traded companies, not acceptable for businesses. They wouldn't get a loan. And it's definitely not acceptable for the state of Illinois, our taxpayer money, to be issuing financial statements that have an adverse negative opinion because there's no internal controls. The numbers are best guesses at the best case scenario, or they're literally just numbers thrown on a page. And this is what we have with someone who has no knowledge of what she's doing, leading an army of accountants and finance professionals with no leadership statewide. And this is what's gotten the state in the mess to begin with because of the lack of financial leadership. But this can change as putting a CPA in there and a forensic accountant. We have an opportunity this November.
Can you explain for those who don't know, and I'm one of them, so when we say a forensic accountant, explain to us what that would do if you bringing that expertise you have. How would that impact the operation of the comptroller, and what impact would that have on state finances?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. A couple times it's been brought up that the comptroller's job is very administrative, but your chief accountant of the state, even a chief accountant, a CFO of a corporation, is in charge of the overall internal control structure. And as a certified fraud examiner, when you're preparing the financial statements, you're doing mini audits. You're looking over each financial information that is flowing to that office. And in that course, you want someone who's trained to identify fraud and risks and communicate them, working with the Inspector General's office. As the next comptroller, I plan to do a statewide initiative because would be the chief elected leader and working with the Inspector General's office, leading the state, doing an anti-corruption and fraud, waste, and abuse campaign. I do not hear right now out of the Inspector General's office them promoting their hotline and encouraging good government. We need top-down leadership to voice that this is important and we're going to take it seriously. We're going to task every taxpayer and vendor to report fraud, waste, and abuse to the state and take a serious approach about cleaning it up. And you definitely want your chief accountant to be taking responsibility for fraud in the organization. It is absolutely on the comptroller, which is management, to make sure we're not wasting money on fraud. Like we saw with the unemployment claims, went out to $457 million that could have helped Illinois residents. Instead, that went out to fraudulent claims.
Well, when you look at some of the institutions of government that have been not operating very well, I mean, by all news reports, one is Children and Family Services. They
Right.
seem to be not have enough caseworkers to go around to protect these children in their care. And so when we talk about this money, it's the kind of thing that even if you didn't lower taxes, even if you didn't lower the state budget, you could better allocate the monies that you have to some of the places where it would do save lives,
Right.
as we have seen children die because there weren't enough caseworkers in the Department of Children and Family Services. And you could go on and on. As we talk, more and more questions open up that I've not thought about before. And as I say, I've been covering state government for 25 years, so a lot of things that the voters. We have a state auditor who is not running for office. He's appointed to a 10-year term. He's a former State House Democrat, Frank, I'm dropping his last name now. Mantino, right. And
Yeah.
so he is there. He'll issue audits periodically. But I'm curious, when the state, let's say, gives money, and I don't know if you've thought about this or have experience, the state gets money. And some of the money that they give out to a county or to a city like Chicago,
Right.
it might be both federal money, it could be state money, whatever. Would the comptroller have any changes that you would bring to? Is there any purpose in, say, following up to see if that money that we gave $100 million to County A and $50 million to County B? Do we follow up and say, did you spend the money for what we intended it for, or did you go out and buy yourself great dinners at Joe's Steakhouse? Is that part of what you would also do as the comptroller?
Yes. So as the comptroller, they should be looking at all those subrecipient payments given to governments, and the inspector general and some of the audit functions look at it. But the comptroller's office is making those payments, and they should be making sure that those expenses are eligible. I have done this in McHenry County, and we do send a lot back to subrecipients of ineligible expenses. And the state needs to do it much more than they're doing it currently. And what just proper financial management can do, it can dramatically change the state. And like you were saying, we could actually fund education. They're not doing it right now. They have the fund actually negative. The State Board of Education is actually negative right now. And so in McHenry County, because of just proper financial management and actually reviewing purchases, we now have no debt. We've rebated money back to the taxpayers as well. And this can be done on the state of Illinois, is actually be able to, instead of using ARPA money to pay down debt, and actually use it to fund education and reforms that actually impact the community and has a return on investment back by attracting new residents to Illinois. And that's what I intend to do as the comptroller, is be that voice to make Illinois the envy of every state in the nation. And that's the opportunity with this comptroller's office. And that's what I intend to do.
As we wrap up, I'm reminded just a while back we had the Chicago public school system. A couple of years back, the head of the school system was indicted and ended up going to jail because she had allegedly some sweetheart deal going on with some vendors and was getting kickback. The point is, has been, for at least the last 100 years, a lot of corruption in the state of Illinois. We all know that. We may not know the specifics, but we know it. And it is something for the voters to understand, that if we moved the state of Illinois into the 21st century in terms of accounting, that better systems of dollars in and dollars out can find those incongruities that would expose and stop the opportunity for corruption. When there is $46 billion moving through the hands of the state, I don't want to say that everyone's corrupt, but there is corruption. And the other thing is, even if it's not corrupt, as you have already alluded to, there can be double billing. There can be accidental overcharging. Even if it's not intentional, people at some business didn't know that they had already sent the invoice in. Maybe their systems aren't so good. So the state's systems need to be good to stop not only, corruption, but the double billing, the bad bookkeeping that otherwise threatens the funds that the state should have to operate on from going out and being overbilled, double billed, etc.
And what we've seen is and you alluded to it, is Frank Montino is the Auditor General for the state of Illinois, and he was the Deputy Majority Leader under Mike Madigan. So Madigan's number 2 becomes the Auditor General, is now auditing Susanna Mendoza, Mike Madigan's protege. He has no audit background. Mendoza is not an accountant. Neither of them know what they're doing. And just in that audit report of $1.6 billion, he's saying it's duplicated revenue entries when it's also underreported revenue. Technically makes no sense. We have someone who's not qualified to be in the role leading auditors and auditing Mike Madigan's protege, and both of them have connections to Mike Madigan, and we need financial reform. Nothing is going to change in Illinois if we leave career politicians who are tied to the corrupt Democrat machine that we have, that has gotten this state into the mess it's been in. So we need to change that by putting a qualified CPA and forensic accountant, a certified internal auditor, a change agent to fix the state and get it on the right path. And that's what I'll do as comptroller, is a dramatic financial reform, working with departments and listening. A lot of these departments want change, but no one has taken the time to meet with them and find out the ways to accomplish that. What is the root of the problem, and go after it and make those changes. And that's what I'll do.
I've already kept you longer than I intended to, but it's been an interesting conversation. And as you said, what you just said, the question occurs to me, and I don't know if you can answer or not, but can you do that in one term? How long before you could make some significant changes, do you think? Because I'm reminded of Leslie Munger being in there, and she, tried to improve things, but you're dealing with sometimes the entrenched bureaucracy.
It took probably 20 years, maybe 40 years to get into this mess because of Susanna Mendoza, even as a state rep. And what I have seen is, in a short amount of time, things can dramatically change. And it's taking a leader who has that voice and who has the knowledge to get the job done. We had a nursing home that was completely in the red, that they were looking to sell the nursing home when I arrived at McHenry County. And in 10 years, we ended up with so much money in the nursing home fund because of financial reform that they were able to rebate money back to the taxpayer and build a dementia ward to serve the citizens of McHenry County. And this is what can be done with simple common sense reform. And because we have no debt now in my county, we invested into close to 90 different projects into the community instead of spending the money to make government bigger. We need to invest it where it's going to impact and make a return on our investment versus just spending it to pay down debt and deal with our fiscal management like it's been done on the state level. And so, yeah, it's going to take 4 years. But I think a lot can be done in 4 years, and it's going to take time to dig out. But with common sense, a lot can be done in a short amount of time.
Shannon Teresi, we appreciate you taking the time to speak with us and discuss the issue. Hopefully the viewers will now have a much better idea about who you are and what you would do and why we have talked about these issues as we have over the last half hour or so. Thank you for joining us, and if you are elected by the people, we hope we could visit with you again and get updates as the comptroller for the state of Illinois.
Thank you so much, Terry. It's so important for voters to understand what choice they have and the importance of this November election and the opportunity to put the most qualified comptroller in Illinois history into that office to change the state.
Well, thank you again. Take care now.
Thank you.